In this video, we're going to go over 5 things dads should know before setting foot in court. My name is Sam Bone. I'm a Gadsden, Alabama custody attorney, and I help dads in custody cases, whether it's a modification or a divorce. So let's get into it. The first thing we're to get into that dads need to know is it's important from the very beginning to fight as hard as you can for as much time as you can. A lot of times you'll be presented with some sort of a temporary settlement at maybe your first hearing. Just understand that at your first hearing, whatever you agree to will be given to the judge at the next hearing, and the judge will be able to look at that and see how things are going. So for instance, if you agree to every other weekend pending a final hearing, at that point you're creating a pattern that shows what you guys have been doing for the last 3 or 4 months pending that final hearing when the judge gets it. Or if you create a pattern of you doing 1 week, the mom doing 1 week, then it's creating that pattern to the judge, creating a routine for the judge to see at that final hearing. And what are courts mainly looking for with children? One of the most important things is stability. And so they're trying to keep schedules the same as long as they can, generally, with some exceptions. And so your temporary settlement will have a lasting effect at your final hearing. Next is find you an attorney that specializes in divorce and custody law. Why do you need to do that? Is a lot of times you may have some sort of a civil lawyer that doesn't necessarily practice all the time with divorce and custody issues, and you want to make sure that you have a lawyer that's got experience with divorce and custody type issues. Number 3, don't bring child support issues up in custody conversations, especially with your spouse. When you're having negotiations with your spouse about time with the child, at that time is not the time to discuss child support. A lot of folks will assume that the reason that you're wanting more time with the child is to lower your child support. And so again, keep those conversations separate. First, deal with the custody aspects, and then you would deal with child support later on. Next is go ahead and draw your schedule up. Because if you're not drawing your schedule up to include what your Christmas is versus what your wife's Christmas is, or when your family has Thanksgiving versus when hers is, then the court's likely just going to enter an order that's a standard order and not take into account what your family does versus what her family does. There's not enough time to litigate those things. Courts don't have time to sit down and find out what your Thanksgiving is, what your Christmas is, and things like that. So they're just going to pop you with a standard order based upon the circumstances. Finally is to make sure that while you're going through this, to do the best you can to extend the olive branch with your child's mother. Anytime that you can agree between the two of you, you've got to do that, because ultimately, after the case is over, whether you like it or not, for the next 10, 15, 18 years, you guys are going to be raising these children together. And if you are creating an atmosphere between the two of you that's toxic, where both of you are always worried about how your interaction is going to be affected in a custody case, it's going to make it much more difficult to raise the children together. It's going to raise stress levels between the two of you, which is then going to affect your kids. And so always be reasonable when discussing with your child's mother, and anytime that you guys can agree, do so, not just for your children, but for your stress level. Again, I'm Sam Bone, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me.